Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for the NALEO Educational Fund's biennial briefing on our projections of Latino turnout in our November elections. The last time we were here having this conversation was prior to the 2014 election, and now here we are ready for Latinos to have an impact on November 2016. We have copies of the PowerPoint available for you in the folders that I will be presenting. This will be also available in a web video file tomorrow, along with the PowerPoint. Once we're done with the PowerPoint presentation, there will be a question and answer period, and we have wireless mics available for that. We are taping this for the video web, and so if we please make sure you use a microphone for that. If you plan to be tweeting about this, please use the hashtag VEYVOTA. That's VEYVOTA. I'll be available afterwards for any interviews you'd like to do individually. And my colleague, Amanda Vosquez, who is our Senior Manager of Communications, is available for any logistics or questions that you may have. So once again, thank you for being with us as we talk about the role of Latino voters in the 2016 presidential election, which promises to be and already has been one of the most exciting competitions for the White House. And as the primaries continue, Latinos will increasingly play a decisive role in this election. One of the reasons why is because this population continues to increase significantly. Latinos are now over 55 million strong of the United States population, 17% of the population, and that's a figure that continues to grow with every single day. What's most remarkable, though, about the Latino population is its youthfulness. In addition to Latinos being the second largest population group in the country, second only to non-Hispanic whites, we are 25% of the nation's youth. About 1 out of every 4 of the children of the United States is a Latino or Latina. And in fact, 44% of our population are millennials, and that's our population that is eligible to vote. We know that millennials have made their mark on the U.S. Landscape, and part of that is driven by the youthfulness of the Latino population. We know that 1/3 of Latinos are under the age of 18. Youthfulness has been a significant barrier to voting. That's something that cures itself over time, for better or for worse. But we know that Latinos, with every single day that goes by, more Latinos are turning 18 years of age and are able to vote. You compare this to the non-Latino population that is an aging population, and that really presents the dichotomy between a young Latino population that's coming of age and an elderly non-Latino population that increasingly is depending on the workforce of Latino workers and Latino youth. Latinos are primarily a U.S.-born population. 2/3 of all Latinos in the United States were born here. 94% of all Latino youth, 94% of all Latinos under the age of 18 are born in the United States. Of our full population, 19.4 million is foreign-born. That's about 1/3 of all Latinos. Again, 2/3 of Latinos being native-born. And that's a comparison then of the Latino population by category. The largest bar there are U.S.-born Latinos, followed by more than 6 million Latinos who are naturalized United States citizens. We have about 4.3 million Latinos who today are eligible to become United States citizens because they are legal permanent residents with at least 5 years of residency. There are about 1.8 million Latinos who are not yet eligible to pursue citizenship, who are legal residents. And then there's an estimate of about 8 million Latinos who are unauthorized. So as we talk about the November 2016 election, I want us to make sure we don't forget about the impact Latinos have had in previous presidential cycles. The fact is that Latinos have had a decisive impact on the outcome of the presidential election dating back since the 2000 election, the Gore versus Bush. Governor Bush would not have won Florida had he not gotten a majority of the Hispanic vote in that state in 2000. In 2004, President Bush garnered up to 44% of the Latino vote, the highest of any Republican candidate for the presidency. We know in 2008 that Latinos played a major role as well. They had a record 9.7 million Latino voters in that election, an increase of 28% over the 2004 election. And just like today, as we're seeing Latinos play a key role in the primary selection process, Latinos did the same thing 8 years ago. John McCain would not have put himself on the trajectory to win the Republican nomination had he not won the Florida Republican primary. That's what turned it around for him 8 years ago. And we know very well that the competition between Hillary Clinton and then Senator Barack Obama was down to the wire, in part because Hillary Clinton's candidacy was buoyed by Latino support. And Latinos were able then to influence both the Republican and primary dynamics, the Republican and Democratic primary dynamics. In 2010, Latinos also showed how they can have an impact on statewide races. Both Senator Michael Bennet in Colorado and Senator Harry Reid in Nevada won their elections because they each garnered more than 70% of the Hispanic vote in their states. In fact, Senator Bennet earning over 80% of the Hispanic vote in very, very closely contested races, each of them winning by less than 10% of the vote. They would not have been reelected in 2010 had it not been for Latino voters in that midterm election. And it also was an important election for Latino Republican candidates. That was the election that brought Marco Rubio to the United States Senate, Susana Martinez as the first Latina elected to any governorship in the 50 United States, the first Latino governor of Nevada, and Brian Sandoval, and a significant increase in the number of Latinos of the Republican Party who continue to serve in the United States Congress. So 2010 was a pivotal year as well for Latino Republicans. In the last presidential election cycle, 2012, Latinos continued to play a major role and decisive impact, increasing their turnout or the number of voters by 15%, growing from 9.7 million voters in 2008 to more than 11 million, 11.2 million voters in 2012. So what we see happening in every single presidential election cycle is a steady increase in the number of Latinos who participate in our elections. And we see that if Latinos are registered to vote, that middle line, that light blue line, are the number of Latinos who are registered to vote. If we get Latinos registered to vote, Latinos will vote. In fact, their turnout rate very much parallels the non-Latino voter participation rate of registered voters. So if we can get people registered, we will have people voting. And that's our challenge. We also know that the number of Latinos eligible to vote continues to increase exponentially. In the last presidential election in 2012, more than 23 million Latinos were eligible to vote. We know there's a performance gap. As much as we know Latinos are decisive and their outcome, their voting has made a difference in the outcome of statewide elections, presidential elections, we also know we have work to do, that there is a performance gap between Latinos and non-Latinos. And here in the two bars, you'll see the comparison of participation rates of eligible Latinos and non-Latinos in presidential elections. And by eligible, we mean adult US citizens. Not all of these folks are registered. Again, if you're registered, you vote. So if we could surpass that barrier, we would have a very different comparison here between Latinos and non-Latinos. One of the things that is driving the Latino electorate are naturalized citizens. In fact, naturalized Latinos are more likely to participate in elections than naturalized non-Latino immigrants in the United States. They may have lower naturalization rates, but once they naturalize, they vote. And here's a comparison of voter turnout rates between Latinos who are native born, those are the blue bars, and Latinos who are naturalized citizens. That's the orange bars. You'll see a consistent pattern of naturalized Latinos outperforming native-born Latinos. So come November, there will be 27.3 million Latinos eligible to vote. Not all registered. That's something that we need to do between now and registration deadlines state by state. But those who are eligible to cast their ballots because they're adult U.S. citizens number 27.3 million. Of those, we project that 13.1 million Latinos will make their voices heard in the polls. Now, let me stress, this is a very conservative number. We have taken into account past performance of Latinos in previous presidential elections, the dynamics in every single election, accounting for outlier elections such as 2008, when there was considerable enthusiasm in that presidential election. We've tempered this outcome, or projection rather, to 13.1 million. It is quite possible that after the summer, once the two parties decide on their presidential nominees, we may be coming back and announcing a revised figure, depending on who the nominees are and how much is invested in Latino mobilization. The fact is that there is very little invested by the philanthropic sector, by political campaigns, and by political donors in mobilizing Latino voters. And that is another one of our major obstacles in mobilizing voters. There is no investment in getting Latinos out to vote in states whose outcome many people assume is predetermined. And here, California and Texas, for example. People assume that the outcome is decided already for November. Half of all Latino voters live in just those two states. So if we ignore California and Texas again, we're ignoring 1 out of 2 Latino potential voters. We can't just focus on Latinos in swing states, and I rest assured that at NALEO, we won't. Another thing about the 13.1 million, the last time there was an open White House, there were 9.7 million Latinos who voted. So now we have an increase of 3.4 million more Latinos who will vote in this presidential election cycle. That's a 35% increase of voters over 2008. And if Latino voters made a major difference in 2008, we know they will make a major difference in 2016. Already we saw the impact of Latinos they are having in the primaries. This is our projection of Latino turnout for Nevada come November. Now, just a few days ago in Nevada, Latinos, and in fact, the debate is still raging between the campaigns and the Democratic Party about who won the Latino vote. We don't know who won the Latino vote. I don't know who won the Latino vote, but I do know this. You can't take the Latino vote for granted. You can't assume you have it in your back pocket. You can't assume it's unattainable. You have to campaign for the Latino vote. And come November, 194,000 Latinos, according to our projections, will vote in Nevada. That's an increase of 23% over 2012. And Nevada is one of the states with the fastest growing Latino populations and the fastest growing electorates, a very young population as well. Colorado's primary is coming up very quickly. And in that state, we project that come November, 277,000 Latinos will vote, representing a 7% increase over the number of Latinos who voted in 2016. One of the big prizes in the Electoral College is Texas. In November, we project that more than 2 million Latinos will vote in the state of Texas out of the 4 million eligible. Again, very little being invested in Latino mobilization in the state of Texas. If we could invest resources in mobilizing Latinos, this number would be very different. Nonetheless, it's a 10% increase over the numbers of Latinos who voted in 2012. We also want to make sure at NALEO that Latinos have all the information at their disposal to make sure that they know where to register to vote, know where their polling place is located, and most importantly, that they know their rights. This will be the first presidential election that will be held without the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. We still do not have a remedy to the Shelby decision issued by the Supreme Court. We believe that there will be many Latinos at risk in this election as a result of that. Later this spring, we will be issuing a report about the number of Latinos we believe that will be directly affected by the lack of full protections of the Voting Rights Act. So what we are doing at NALEO is making sure that we have a resource available to our community. We operate a bilingual hotline all year long, and this year it will be staffed by individuals who will have all the information at the ready about registration deadlines in all 50 states, polling place locations in all 50 states, and if on election day, including primary day and in November, anybody encounters any kind of problem at the polling booth, whether they're turned away, they're told they're not registered to vote, they're denied the right to vote, they're asked for ID where it's inappropriate, or they're showing up believing they're registered to vote and they're denied a provisional ballot, there is recourse here at NALEO. You can call our toll-free number at 888-839-8682. We will have on election day attorneys at the ready to make sure that we can take immediate action to make sure nobody is turned away on election day. This is part of our voter protection work. We're part of the Election Protection Coalition. That coalition will be announcing its efforts at another press conference tomorrow, and we will be a part of that because the NALEO Educational Fund is the Latino arm of the Election Protection Coalition. We are the organization that provides all of the information to voters who seek that information in Spanish as well. So let's talk a little bit now about candidates running in 2016. We talked about Latinos and their impact as voters, but as we saw in 2010, Latino candidates can also make history in this election, just like they did then. First of all, it's quite a historic moment that we have two Latinos running for president with not just viable campaigns, but actually being the three top candidates for their party's nomination in Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. And Ted Cruz having made history by being the first Latino candidate ever to win a presidential primary when he won the Iowa caucuses. And we're going to be following this election very closely to see how well both Senators Cruz and Rubio do. This isn't the first time that we've had viable Latino candidates running for the nomination of their party. In 2008, Governor Bill Richardson ran for the nomination of the Democratic Party. So now hopefully we'll have a new tradition of Latinos running for president as just a matter of course in every single presidential election cycle going forward. In terms of the United States Senate and candidates, we have Latinos running in 3 of the states for the United States Senate, and the seat being vacated by Senator Barbara Boxer, who's retiring. U.S. Representative Loretta Sanchez is running for the Democratic primary. In Florida, for the seat being vacated by Senator Rubio, we have the sitting Lieutenant Governor Carlos Lopez Cantera and Pastor Ernesto Rivera, both vying for the Republican primary. And in Nevada, in the seat being vacated by the retiring Harry Reid, the former Attorney General of that state, Catherine Cortez Masto, is running for that the Democratic Party's nomination, again in Nevada. Congressional districts, we have Latinos running for Congress all over the country. We have quite a few running in California. In the 21st District, which is held by Congressman Baladao, we have 2 Latinos who seek to challenge him, seeking the Democratic primary. It's an open primary in California. In California, the top 2 candidates, regardless of party, go on to the November election. In the 24th Congressional District, which is being vacated by Lois Capps, we have Salud Carvajal, who's a county supervisor of Santa Barbara County, running for that in that primary. And in District 32, we have an intra-party competition here, where Roger Hernandez, a state legislator, is challenging the incumbent Grace Napolitano in that primary. Moving on, in District 44, the district being vacated by Janice Hahn, who's running for a County Supervisor seat in Los Angeles County. This district, incidentally, District 44, was drawn by the California Independent Redistricting Commission specifically to create a majority of a Latino electorate. And in here, former Hermosa Beach City Council member Nanette Barragan is running against Isidore Hall, a sitting legislator. And in the seat being vacated by Loretta Sanchez, who's running for the Senate, Lou Correa is running, as well as business entrepreneur Luis Contreras. So there will be a change, a significant change in the California delegation among Latinos come November. In Florida, State Representative David Santiago is running in Congressional District 6. In Congressional District 9, this is another district that was created after the 2011 redistricting process to give Latino voters a say in the outcome of elections. With a 42% of the electorate being Latino, we have Ricardo Rangel, Darren Soto, and Wanda Rentas running for the nominations for their respective party in Florida 9. And this is a district that sits in the Central Florida area outside Orlando. It includes Kissimmee and other suburbs of Orlando. Down in Dade, Miami County, Carlos Curbelo, the sitting congressman, is running for re-election, and he's being challenged by the individual who previously held that seat, Joe Garcia, but also Annette Tadeo, who had run for lieutenant governor in the last election. Here, close by in the state of Maryland, the sitting state delegate, Josephine Peña Melnick, who's of Dominican background, is running in the 4th Congressional District. It's a vacancy, as is Ana Sol Gutierrez, another state representative, running in the seat being vacated by Van Hollen, who is running for the Senate. In Nevada, we have 2 districts where Latino candidates are seeking the nomination of their parties. In Nevada 3, Dr. Annette Tijero, who's an anesthesiologist who had previously run for Congress, is seeking the bid again to run in Nevada 3. And in Nevada 4, we have 3 Latinos running for the Democratic nomination there. We have Lucy Flores, who was a state representative, ran for lieutenant governor, sitting state senator Ruben Cuhin, and the former speaker of the assembly, John Oseguera, running in that district that is in Clark County. Again, a district with a large Latino population. In New York, Charlie Rangel, has announced his retirement. He announced it when he ran for this last term of his. It's a very crowded field of Democrats running to replace him. It is a strong Democratic seat, so the primary winner will most likely be the next member of Congress from that district. It has a district with a large Dominican population, northern Manhattan and the Bronx. And State Senator Adriano Espaillat, who had previously challenged Charlie Rangel, is running once again. Former State Assembly member Adam Powell, his father served in Congress. He's a son of African-American father, Puerto Rican mother, running for election, as is State Assembly member Guillermo Linares, who was a prior member of the City Council and also now in the state legislature, also Dominican background. So we'll see what happens in that primary, which will be strongly contested by all the candidates there, as will Texas 15. This is the district in South Texas being vacated by Ruben Hinojosa, who also is retiring. We have a large field there of both Latinos in the Democratic and Republican Party running for their party's nomination to be the next representative of Texas 15. Texas 23 is the district with the longest share of the U.S.-Mexico border, previously held by Pete Gallego, who is now challenging Representative Hurd, who defeated him in 2014. This is considered to be the most competitive election in the United States. In Texas 29, this is a seat that sits in the city of Houston, held by the incumbent Gene Green. He is facing challengers in the Democratic primary, Adrian Garcia, who was the former sheriff of Harris County, a former member of the Houston City Council, had run for mayor, came in third, and is now running to challenge Gene Green. And you'll see there, Dominique Garcia is also running in the Democratic primary, and we have a Republican in Julio Garza also seeking that party's nomination for that Houston seat. We also have a number of Latinos and Latinas running in statewide contests. And in some states where we would be a little surprised to see Latinos running for statewide office. I mean, in Missouri, in Delaware, Newcastle County Sheriff Trinidad Navarro is running for Delaware Insurance Commissioner. In Illinois, former state representative and the current city clerk, Susana Mendoza, is running for Illinois Comptroller. In Indiana, former Lake County Judge Lorenzo Arredondo, who was the longest-serving state trial judge in the country, a past president of the Hispanic National Bar Association, is running to be the Indiana Attorney General. In Missouri, diplomat Pat Contreras, who served both in Republican and Democratic administrations in the State Department, is running for Missouri State Treasurer. Nora Espinosa, State Representative, is running for Secretary of State in New Mexico. In North Carolina, pediatrician Rosemary Fernandez Stein is running for Superintendent of Public Instruction. In Texas, Texas Real Estate Commissioner Weston Martinez is running for the Texas Railroad Commissioner to join one of the Bush patriot. Why am I blanking on Mr. Bush's first name? George P. Bush, to join George P. Bush on the Texas Railroad Commission. And in the state of Washington, University Place Mayor Javier Figueroa is running to be Washington Lieutenant Governor. Javier Figueroa is a naturalized U.S. citizen from Mexico. He was the first naturalized Latino U.S. citizen to be elected to office in the state of Washington. These individuals all seek to join the current number of Latinos in elected office. There are currently more than 6,000 Latinos serving across the country in more than 41 states. We hope that come November 8th, 2016, the number of Latinos and Latinas serving this country in elected office will grow significantly, both in Congress, at state level, and in the numerous offices and in municipalities and school boards around the country. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I also would like to remind you that come March 15th, we will be holding our Edward R. Roybal Legacy Gala. This will begin Naleo's commemoration of our 40th anniversary. We will be presenting the Roybal Award to former HUD Secretary Henry Cisneros, and it'll be a very special and historic evening for Naleo. We will be joined that night by the two other Latino HUD secretaries. The Honorable Mel Martinez, who served in the Bush administration, will be part of the program, and the current HUD Secretary, Julian Castro, will be joining us as well. It'll be the first time that all three Latino HUD secretaries will be in the same room at once. So we're happy about that. And then we will be back come June 23rd to the 25th for the NALEO 33rd Annual Conference. And we have every expectation to be hosting whomever become the presumptive nominees for the presidency of the United States. We hosted the presumptive nominees in 2008 in Senators Obama and McCain, and the nominees in 2012 in President Obama and Governor Romney. And we've already issued invitations to all of the Republicans and Democrats left in the respective fields that should they be the presumptive nominees come June 23rd, we will welcome them at the NALEO Annual Conference. So with that, happy to take your questions.
Yes, thank you for doing this. Maria Peña with La Opinión. I was wondering if you could go back a little bit on, I know that you've said there's not enough investment in Latino voters despite the numbers, and you have less than half or about half of those eligible to vote going to the polls in November. So I was wondering if you could tell us what's your take on or your assessment on whether or not the Supreme Court ruling is going to have some sort of effect in mobilizing the Latino vote in November, besides the fact that there's not enough investment and that the parties are neglecting the Latino electorate. Thank you.
And in the Supreme Court ruling, you're referring to the Shelby decision that undermined the Voting Rights Act. Well, what that did is add insult to injury. Rather than expanding the franchise and making voting more accessible in this country, we have taken steps to make voting even more difficult. So we have now removed protections of the Voting Rights Act, and we also have introduced in some states efforts to make it harder for people to register to vote and to vote, such as in the state of Texas, that immediately implemented a very restrictive voter ID law, which is why we're making sure at NALEO that we provide our voters with information about how to comply with these new requirements. What we need to make sure is that we invest in the Latino electorate, and we also make sure that nobody's turned away who seeks to actually respect their right to vote and actually show up at the polls come November. Fernando.
Arturo, thank you. You mentioned now that in 2008 and again now in 2016, and when we have an open White House, run for the White House, you saw the biggest increases, or you're projecting this time. I remember in 2012 that the number was slightly lower, if I remember correctly, than what was initially projected. Are you kind of picking up to what we discussed last week, also here at the press club? Also, as a coincidence, if we think about 2008 and 2016, besides the fact that we have an open run for the White House, we also had back then the Sensenbrenner bill, and now we have the Trump effect. So how much of a coincidence do you think that might be in the numbers that you're projecting now, if this is another record turnout, and just not just the open run for the White House, but those two political phenomena, y en español también for us. Thank you.
Let me take it first in Spanish. Aquí en Aleo estamos proyectando que más de 13 millones de latinos van a ir a las urnas en noviembre, pero es muy posible que más salgan a las urnas tomando en cuenta quién serán los candidatos para la presidencia después de las convenciones partidistas en julio. Sabemos que los latinos están siguiendo muy de cerca estas contiendas y se están fijando en todos los candidatos de ambos partidos. Yeah. I'm sorry? We will come back most likely after July with a revised projection. These projections that we're issuing today of 13.1 million are based on past performance of Latinos. We will be following exactly the dynamic that we're seeing evolving in this current presidential election cycle, depending on who the nominees become, not just the Trump effect, but it's very likely that one or both parties may decide to have Latinos on the ticket in terms of the vice presidential nominees, if not at the top of the ticket in terms of the Republican Party. So we may have a very different dynamic in late July once both parties make their final decisions on their nominees.
Thank you. Peggy Archowski, I'm the congressional correspondent for the Hispanic Outlook magazine. Do you have a rundown of not only the voting estimates in each state, but by party? And I'm wondering if you think the incredible prominence of Republican candidates, especially Rubio and Cruz, will increase the number of Hispanics voting Republican.
First, on party data, that data is imprecise because not all states collect registration data and ethnicity data together. For example, the state of Texas does not collect ethnic or racial data on voter registration forms. So much of the ethnic data for registered voters come from running surnames. So it's an imprecise number, but we do have national data, and I will direct you to my colleague Amanda Bosques, who could give you the exact numbers that we have available on a state-by-state basis of party. Now, in terms of having Latinos on the ticket, would a Cruz or Rubio candidacy inspire Latino voters? It's quite possible. We've seen that happen in the past, but we've also seen it where Latinos do not necessarily vote by surname and do not necessarily vote by political party. Latinos are actually a very savvy and sophisticated electorate. They follow candidates and campaigns. They look at what the candidates say and not just at the last name or the political party, which is why no one should assume that Latinos will vote for the Democrat and not vote for the Republican, or vote for the Republican and not the Democrat. Latinos are following this election very closely, and I think come late July, once the nominees are decided, we will see a very different dynamic. The fight for the Latino vote really will begin come late July. In the back.
Hi, Arturo. My name is Marilu Mayorga. I have a question. And according to the Texas Center for the Advancement of Literacy and Learning, there is a large portion, Texas A&M University, there's a large portion of Hispanics that don't know how to read and write in Texas. In particularly Presidio County, Hudspeth, Valverde, Dummit, and Moore County. So given that Texas also has a high amount of millennials, what advice would you give millennials, considering that there are Hispanics that don't know how to read and write and could be American citizens? We don't know. We can't identify them.
Right.
What can millennials do to organize and help their communities, and particularly in places like Texas, for people to be able to go out to vote?
Well, one of the biggest differences that we have in this election cycle is that technology has evolved in impressive ways and makes information available at your fingertips. So my advice to millennials is not just empower yourself by acquiring the information that's readily available through your smartphone about candidates and campaigns, but empower the person next to you and making sure that individuals in your family and your community also understand the importance of your personal vote and the importance of being informed and participating as a United States citizen. Over there.
Eileen Schleff, Creative Alliance Communications, and I can say that as someone who's there, Mr. Roybal would be very proud of what Naneo's doing.
Thank you.
My question is, having been involved for a long time, I'm worried about what's going to happen on the ground, but I'd like you to address the coalitions you're building, because I know Univision's involved, and I know you've been working to build coalitions, and I think that's critical to the future.
So as Fernando Pizarro mentioned, last week we were here to announce a coordinated effort. NALEO has joined with its sister organizations, a total of 9 national Latino organizations, coordinating efforts on voter registration and voter engagement to make sure that no Latino is left behind in this election. So we're working in the Latino Coalition, specifically in that effort. We're also part of the Election Protection Coalition, joining with organizations in the African American and Asian Pacific Islander communities to make sure that all voters are informed about how to register to vote, where to vote, and make sure they have the information available should they encounter any problem at the polling booth come election day. So we're working both in the Latino community and in multicultural coalitions to make sure that all Americans are able to vote in this election. Yes.
Hi, Gretchen Sierra-Zarita. I'd like to talk about the Puerto Rican vote in Florida specifically.
I'm sorry, the which vote?
The Puerto Rican vote.
Puerto Rican vote.
In Florida. It is assumed that the Puerto Rican vote in Florida can be used to leverage federal intervention in Puerto Rico with regards to the fiscal crisis, which is quite disastrous. So it counts a lot, that vote, for the Puerto Ricans that live on the island. Pew says there are 1 million Puerto Ricans in Florida right now. Many have arrived recently and have arrived over the last 6 years, and the island is losing about 1,000 Puerto Ricans per week. We are assuming many are landing in Florida, although that's not the only community. It is also assumed that, well, you hear people, and this is a question, you hear people saying that they lean Democrat. But I have never seen any factual data of that, partly because, like you say, in many states, registration and party allegiance is not tied. In a state like Florida, you have 6 Puerto Rican state legislators who are Republican and 6 Puerto Rican state legislators who are Democrat. And the new arrivals are true independents, and there are a lot of those. Do you have any data that describes this population? Are they real independent voters? Are they anything? Because I have not seen such a data.
For every primary election, we issue a profile of the state. So once we get closer to the Florida primary, the Naleo Educational Fund will be issuing a profile of the Latino electorate of the state of Florida. So we'll have that information in a few weeks. But we do know this about Florida. It is a true swing state. It was won by George W. Bush in 2000 and 2004, by Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, in large part in those 4 elections because of the performance of Hispanic voters in the state of Florida. We will have more Latinos voting in Florida in 2016 than ever before. Their impact will be more important than ever before as well. Okay, well, thank you once again for joining us. Again, we have lunch outside, and if anybody wants to do a separate interview, I'll be here for a few more minutes. Thank you.
Sí, igualmente. Es que llegué tarde y pensé que si te preguntaba esto ya lo habían hablado. Te quería pedir si me puedes aclarar un poco la brecha entre los que están elegibles y menos de la mitad que tú piensas que va a votar. ¿Por qué tan poquito? Menos de la mitad.
Bueno, hay varias razones porque la mitad de los latinos no votan. En primer lugar, no hay inversión en recursos en movilizar a los votantes latinos. La mitad de todos los latinos que pueden votar viven en 2 estados, California y Texas. De allí ya todo el mundo cree que está decidido los resultados de las elecciones. No van y hacen campaña en los candidatos en esos estados. Y no hay movilización.